quickly start off
Oh,
with
you're going to, great. Yeah, over to you, Horatio.
absolutely. Well, a really big welcome to everyone who is watching the call, and welcome to today's session in the public publishing masterclass series. We are so excited as usual to have Denise with us, taking us through what will be an exceptional session. But before we get to that, I'm just going to run a really quick warm-up activity. So, can I confirm that everyone on the call has been able to access the interactive presentation? Give me a physical thumbs up. We've got one, we've got two. Amazing. All right, so this is just a quick warm up to see what we know about the publishing industry, and I've got all of these stats from the Independent Writers Association. So any questions about the validity of them, do not posit them on me, but hopefully they give us a good rough indication of where we are. So we've got one player in, we're waiting for one more.
That would be me.
No worries, no worries. So just whilst we're
Okay,
waiting.
I'm having problems, so I think just carry on. Yeah. I think
Okay,
I've got too many tabs open, I'm afraid.
no problem. All right, so it's me and Erin. Let's see how this goes. And so question number one. The quicker you answer, the more points you get. In 2018, how many print books were sold in the UK? How many print books were sold in the UK? I know this is really easy stuff for Denise. Okay, so the actual answer is 190.9 million. Obviously, a really decent amount of books, particularly given that in this digital age, people obviously have the opportunity to kind of go both for digital and physical. That's still a significant number. And what you'll see is the 675 million is the amount that was sold in the US. So it still is the case that people like the feel and opportunity to purchase a physical book. So what that does for our leaderboard, there's only one person, but you're winning anyway. It's all good. All right. So on that basis, moving forward, on to question number two. And the question, which should appear this time, is by 1501, how many books had been printed globally? By 1501, how many books had been printed globally? Now, obviously, these are rough estimations, I imagine, from historical record, but just a rough figure. So your suggestion is 10. The actual answer is 8. So across the world, up until our history, we estimate that there had been about 8 million books. Now, imagine that's probably a few days worth of sales at this moment in time. But really, really interesting to note that for the very beginning part of history, books were essentially a form of technology. I mean, to get your hand on a book in an earlier stage in our history would have been difficult. You think about all of the processes that we have around printing and so on, which have improved massively and now mean that we see this explosion where there is so much available to the point that we don't even need it to be printed. It can actually just be put into the online format and you can have unlimited versions very, very quickly at your disposal. So moving on. It's great because even though we only have one player who still hasn't scored a point, you're still winning. Just goes to show in life, you stay in there, good things happen. So on to question number 3. And the question is, the largest online bookstore was created in which year? The largest online bookstore was created in which year? So you have gone for 2007, and that's correct. Yes, yes, and it is indeed Amazon Kindle. It was launched in 2007. Now, for many people, it might seem like a while ago, but it is true that prior to that, we didn't have kind of this big, massive bookstore with so many different options available. And it really has been significant, not just for the publishing industry, but particularly for people who have sought to publish independently. And things like Kindle have really helped to kind of create access opportunities for people, particularly in the independent space. So, well done. Not only are you just winning, but you actually have points now. So this is the kind of progress we like to see, and we're very happy to see it indeed. So we move on to our next question. Number 4 of the 6 that we will be looking at today. And the question is, between 2011 and 2013, the non-traditional share of book sales in the US increased by how much? Did it go from 0 to 30%, 20 to 40, or 40 to 60? And the actual answer is from roughly 0% to roughly 30%. It was almost non-existent, and it went up to a significant amount. Now, again, we've highlighted that obviously Kindle happened in the 2007 bracket, but just after that, there was a kind of period, a steady building period. And for some reason, 2011 to 2013, we did witness in the US a really big explosion in terms of the share of non-traditional the share of non-traditional book sales. And when we say non-traditional book sales, that's from a wide variety of spaces outside of your kind of major publishing spaces. This is not in any way suggesting that major publishing is bad, but just really speaking about the ways in which the game, if you will, has opened up. So moving on to our next question, only 2 more. So the next question is, Amazon's Kindle Unlimited paid out how much to independent authors in 2019? Now, that's excluding regular sales. Obviously, Amazon Unlimited is the subscription service where you can pay and get access to things. How much did they pay out? You have said 500 billion. It's actually 250 million, but 250 billion, 500 billion, it's still a significant amount of money. There is an exceptional amount in the online space which is going out to independent authors. So final piece that we're going to take us to before we kindly hand over to Denise is our final question that you will see here. Oh, for some reason, it will appear in a moment. What percentage of children's books had included Black characters? So, 16.7% in 1965 and 20% in 2013, 26.7% in 1965 and 40% in 2013, or the correct answer, which is 6.7% in 1965 and 10% in 2013. Now, what's interesting here is that obviously, even since 2013, my imagination is that there has been a significant, or there probably has been a significant amount of kind of push within the publishing industry to have even more diversity. And so, whilst between 1965 and 2013, from the statistics that we had available, there had been a limited amount of change. I imagine that if we were to kind of compare 2013 to 21, there's probably, and this is only guessing, there's probably a good amount that has happened, but I still don't know how far that would have gone. And we obviously programs like this are really set about making sure we create even more opportunities to increase the diversity of people in publishing, as well as characters that we are kind of thinking through. And so, having done that quiz, before we kind of formally hand over to Denise for some Denise magic, I just quickly hand over to both of you for any immediate thoughts or reflections. Is there anything that stands out to you?
Apart from the, the last point, which remains deeply shocking, and I think to your point, Horatio, is probably not, I'm sure it has improved, but to nowhere near the degree that it should have done. I think the other thing that highlights for me is actually how we as publishers have to really justify our keep and position, really, because there are lots of opportunities for people to publish themselves. So to actually go with a publisher and to take that decision, there has to be something that we are offering that you're not going to get from Amazon, whether that's a direct Amazon publishing relationship or Amazon or Kindle Unlimited, etc. So I think it's a reminder that we should not take anything for granted. There are routes to market that do not involve us necessarily.
So that's really, really interesting because we've obviously heard from the kind of publisher side. And so, Erin, from your side as the upcoming superstar writer, how does that make you feel listening to it? Does it make you think, you know what, I might just go the independent route? Like, who knows? Or is there any change? What do you think?
I think it's made me realize I don't work well under pressure, just trying to rush those answers. And actually, like, whilst this is quite negative, I think it's made me realize there's a lot I don't know or understand. Like, I think I've been very much in my head about what to write, how to write, as opposed to like what would then happen if I was ready and what avenues there are to be considering.
So true. And I imagine that there are lots of people in that same position. There is so much. I think when you are, if you are established writer who kind of does this on a regular basis, then you've got so much kind of institutional memory that is already with you. It's kind of like riding a bike. You just do it over and over. But you're right. If you are new to this, there are so many things that you're thinking about. And maybe on a philosophical level, you could think, what's right for me and the book that I need to put forward. Then it's always the financial side of, if I'm going to do all of this work, which one is going to give me the biggest return? And there are so many questions about branding, promotion, all of the other things, support. I've even heard some people speak about the idea of having a team around you. Who do you want to have in your corner as you're developing things? What's going to make you most comfortable as you go through that process? Do you have that framework around you already? Is that something that maybe the publisher is going to be able to provide? All of these fantastic questions provide us with the basis to hand over to Denise for today's session.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Horatio. And really taking that as a starting point, what we want to do with this series of webinars really is to shed some light on what obviously is, I think, both in the perception and in the reality, quite a closed-looking industry, publishing. A lot of people think about writing, but then when it comes to, well, actually, what are the different routes? How could I possibly get published? That is very dark and, opaque and quite mysterious. So I think what I would really love to be able to do is to just do a bit of demystification and just open that up. It's absolutely not rocket science, but to give people some idea of not just the writing, but then what they can do with that and what are the different routes that they can take. And as far as that's concerned, we could talk about agents, we can talk about approaching publishers directly, we can talk about publishing yourself versus going to a publisher, and certainly that's something that I would cover in subsequent sessions if useful. But what I've focused on today is really putting together a framework for pitching your idea. And I think this should be useful whether you are thinking about going to an agent, because you need to get taken on by an agent. They don't accept everybody who comes along, obviously. So it's thinking about what's going to put you in the best position to be taken on by an agent. Or if you're approaching a publisher directly, how can you best get their attention? How can you best present your idea so that it looks commercial and attractive? So I'm going to share, I very much hope, my screen here, and I'll preface this by saying my career has been in non-fiction, so I'm not going to talk about fiction here. Non-fiction is the area I work in Octopus, and how I've spent my entire working life, actually. So just as well that Irene, that is your particular area of interest too. So let me okay. Now, I had this problem earlier and I had to go in through Google Chrome, which is why I think I had quite so many, because it doesn't like me sharing on Firefox. So hang on a second. Can you see that? No. Okay. Now, if I send this to you, Horatio, yeah, sorry, this is it's some compatibility problem. This automatically opens up on Firefox, and I need to get it onto Chrome somehow. So let me just see if I can send this to you, Horatio. Sorry about this. I
No
did
worries.
try it earlier, and it worked then, and of course, it doesn't now. Has that come through?
Yes, I will just open it up as we speak.
That is extremely good. Thank you. We're then, I'm afraid, going to have to do the next slide, please thing, but I'm sure we'll cope.
Okay, so after passing all of the antivirus tests that my computer has given it, we are now in a space where I can start to share. And so in a moment, you will see on screen the PowerPoint, and we are ready to move forward at your leisure.
Wonderful. Thank you. So, in a word, how to get published, quite an ambitious target for 30 minutes, but let's get cracking. So if you're okay just to move through, Horatio, that would be brilliant. So what I've set out here is, I think, a framework for how you can approach this, and I'm sure I'm saying a lot of very obvious things in many ways. So we can move quite quickly through the first parts of this. I think the first thing is you need to identify your audience. Obviously, is it adult? Is it children's? Is it fiction? Is it non-fiction? But then within that, which is the sector that you're aiming at? And this goes exactly to the conversation where we started, Irene, at the beginning of this. Are you thinking about your book as a more specialist professional kind of manual, or is this something that you think should have mass market interest and be something that you can sell from, you know, Tesco's to Waterstones and have a very broad-based audience? And if we move on, I've just pulled out some titles here that I think illustrate that choice, if you like. And if you could just keep clicking on, actually, Horatio, that would be fantastic. So obviously the Marcus Rashford book is very much aimed at a children's audience. He could have done that for adults, I think. But I'm sure that was a decision based on his work in children's food, etc. And I'm sure sort of his own interests as well. But he's taken his message and made that suitable for a 10 to 14 sort of age group. The next one, very clearly a professional manual. You can see that being a course book that's aimed at a more niche audience within the therapy world. Ruby Wax, on the other hand, that is again sort of entry level, accessible, kind of general interest. And then I just chucked the last one in because this completely contradicts probably everything I'm going to say in this session. And that's just really to point out that there's always something that comes from left field and surprises us as publishers. And this is a complete wild card. It's a sort of children, adult illustrated book crossover. Everything says that shouldn't work. And yet that book has sold 1.2 million copies just in the UK, actually, since publication. So it's possible to do something that completely overturns all the kind of rules. But to be honest, it's harder. So, you know, if you're playing it safer, you're really taking the route that you think is most easily going to get you published, then kind of fitting within the established framework is the easier way to do it. So next, thinking about kind of positioning your book for that audience. So is it an absolutely definitive Bible on the subject? You know, maybe 500 pages. This is absolutely the last word on something. Is it more kind of entry level, just designed to be a kind of taster, get people interested? Is it information? Is it entertainment? Or is it, and this is the holy grail, is it both? And just to apply that then to the books that we looked at previously. So if we could move on to the next one. Thanks, Horatio. And thank you. So Marcus Rashford, obviously very accessible treatment for kids. Again, Ruby Wax, aimed at a kind of entry level, very general audience. Professional audience for that CBT therapy book. And then here's a really good example of something that is entertainment, and I know that's an odd word to use, of something that is actually quite a serious subject area, but it is fundamentally, you know, it's stories, it's real life situations that he is talking about with information. So you actually kind of find out how the law works in the process. And if you're looking for the really successful, in terms of sales genres there, then, you know, The Secret Barrister is kind of where you're at, I would say. Then other decisions around where you're positioning it. Where would you see it being in a bookshop? This is the business bestseller chart from Smith's, for example. So, you know, that dictates a certain style of approach. The next image is showing you a gift and humour table in Waterstones, I think. So, you know, Vladimir Putin, life coach, compared to kind of those previous, clearly much more serious sort of business titles. I mean, I'm kind of exaggerating here, but I think it really helps people to think, actually, what kind of book do I want to do here? By kind of going into a bookshop and thinking, okay, where, you know, ideally, where would my book be? And from that, I think various things follow. So moving on to, these are the 6 key things, and I'm going to go into these in detail. But these are the 6 key things that I think you should include in any pitch. And I think that's whether you're sending that to an agent, whether you're sending it directly to a publisher. So first of all, your kind of headline grabbing summary mission statement, what is this book? Why are you going to get anybody's attention with it? Second, your kind of audience, and then within that audience, where is it positioned? So the kind of who is it for question. Then this is the more kind of bread and butter stuff, but your synopsis, what are your chapters? What's going to be in those chapters very, very loosely. Comparative titles, and this is a big area of discussion, actually, what we call kind of comps in publishing, and I'll come on to it in a little bit more detail. But again, that's about positioning your work. Then your information, and then crucially some sample chapters, so to show your writing. So to look at the first one, now I'm actually using a real life case study here. So this is a book that was presented to us by a debut author, actually. So she'd never published before, and this approach, this pitch, then led to a book actually being published. So it absolutely did the job, and I've pulled this out because I think this is a really effective pitch actually to use. So what you've got here is your kind of mission statement to start with, and it can be really effective to use a quote. I think you don't have to, but just getting something out there that says what the book is about. So in this case, our author Kerry Danes, I've chosen to tell these particular stories for many reasons. Some are heartbreaking, others are thought-provoking, some are just really, really weird. So you kind of already have a bit of dark humor in there. What connects them is my personal sense of having been affected by them, that and the insight they give us into the human condition, often in resolutely inhuman ways. So you've already, I think, got somebody's attention there, because, what is it that she's actually going to be talking about in this book? And you're pressing lots of buttons in terms of human interest, insight, some kind of almost secret world, I think, as well. So this is what this book is. The Dark Side of the Mind is the memoir of Kerry Danes, one of the UK's leading forensic psychologists, who's worked with some of Britain's most complex and challenging criminals and their victims in prisons and secure hospitals. So that's telling you it's a memoir, not a manual. And why should we care about this? Well, actually, that's obviously a pretty interesting professional background. She's drawing on case files from 20 years on the front line. Narrative exposes the often shocking human stories that lie beneath the crimes we hear about in the news. Her book will offer readers unique insight into psychological causes, illuminating the darkest corners of our shared human psyche. And then there's a kind of secondary thing here. As Kerry navigates each case, readers will also follow the trajectory of her own personal growth as she intersperses case histories with her own memories, reflections, and sense of humour. So I think you get what the book is about, and also that behind this is a real author who is also going to go on a journey in the course of this. And actually, if we can click on, just breaking that down, sorry, Horatio, would you mind going back? I'm really sorry about this. I'm going to ban Firefox from my computer henceforth. So quote can be a good way of grabbing attention. If it's not a quote, then I think that kind of, mission statement, what is this book up front? You're positioning the book. It's a memoir. It's not a manual. What is it about and why should we care? And then what secondary elements does it offer? So it's not trying to do everything. It's been quite selective in what it's saying, but the choice of information there, I think, is really very strong in terms of selling it. So moving on to the next element here, who's the book for and why will they buy it? And I guess this is where, you know, we have to remember kind of publishing, it is a business. We love publishing really fantastic books, and that's what we get up for in the morning, but we also need them to sell, otherwise we're all out of a job. So it is about thinking who's the audience out there, and why are they going to buy it. So again, using this example, there are numerous potential groups of readers who will be interested. In particular, it will have clear appeal to a true crime readership, readers of medical memoirs, such as books by authors Adam Kane, Henry Marsh. Not sure about Adam Kane, but anyway, those interested in compelling real life stories. It's an inspirational story of a woman forging a career in a profession which has seen significant obstacles faced by her gender. Then it highlights the issues in the book, referencing Secret Barrister, complexities of modern mental health care, overcrowding in the prison system, the public's understanding of high-profile criminal cases, and Kerry's career has taken place against this shifting government policy. So it's already kind of signposting some subjects that are going to be good for promoting that book in the media as well. And then it also looks at, well, where would you see this book selling? It could be promoted on everything from, you know, a more mass market outlet like Loose Women to Radio 4, Waterstones to supermarkets. So it's about making it easy, I suppose. That's a really good question. That's my highlighting there, because I think those are the key elements of that to pull out. You could equally highlight that yourself to, you know, to make the job easy for somebody reading it quickly. So again, just breaking that down a little bit. Sorry, Horatio, to be using you as.
Oh, absolutely. I will go on to the next slide, but just for the purpose of the recording, I'll highlight that the question that was posed to Denise just now was, is the bold writing Denise's writing, or was it made bold by the writer? And obviously you've heard the response. Denise was the one who made it bold.
Thank you. So just to recap on that, really, there's a very clear identification of the core audience. It picks up on what the secondary appeal is, which is, I think, the female-focused aspect. The author is a female forensic psychologist in a profession that is quite male-dominated. It's pulling out some potential themes for media and promotion in terms of those, you know, big questions about prison system, mental health care, etc. And it's also picking up on the potential sales channels. So, you know, the author isn't saying, right, I see this as a really high-end thing that is only going to sell in, you know, in Waterstones. It's also, you know, she sees it as being kind of popular enough to be something that works in supermarkets as well. Thank you. So synopsis, I won't read all of this out, but just to give you an idea really of a kind of potential structure here, which I think works very well. And it doesn't have to be huge. So for your chapter synopsis, I would again do a summary like this at the front. So what's the order going to be? Is it going to be chronological? Is it going to be thematic? You know, there are various ways of sort of structuring things, and what you want to get over in your synopsis is how that structure is going to work. So in this case, the book will follow Kerry. She works with criminals, victims in prisons, hospitals, courtrooms. It's a kind of almost a case study approach. So it's not, right, I started my career here and I've ended my career there, and this is a kind of chronological you know, move through it. It's actually about interesting kind of stories and events and the themes that she's going to pull out. in the course of that. And then she gives a number, and I've shortened this for the purposes of this presentation, but you would just ideally give a sentence or two for each chapter and what that chapter is going to cover. So the example here, the case of the missing finger, sounds like something from Sherlock Holmes actually, but a pretty horrendous story of discovering a severed human finger in somebody's cell, and it turns out it's had been sent or given to him by a girlfriend during a prison visit. So, pulling out things obviously that are pretty attention grabbing. And I've just given a couple of other examples if we move on, but really your chapter synopsis, so again, just an example of a couple of chapters there, and then a kind of summary. So here, Courage is going to offer some final reflections on her career. Also, because these do affect women disproportionately, her thoughts on gender roles in her work, and also then kind of wider society issues as well that she has encountered in that. So a kind of conclusion and a pulling together of all of those threads. So that's the synopsis. Now, comparative titles. And I'm going to move to one side a little bit here from the what you would do in a pitch. I mean, I do think comp titles are very good, but for us as publishers to take on a book, we have to present that proposal. So whatever you as the author send us, we have to present that in an acquisitions meeting that is 20, 30 people in a room normally, or these days on a Zoom call. And we are the representatives of that book. So we have to say why we think the company should take that on. So that's the kind of first thing. Do we actually want to publish it? So we have to make all of those sales points. We have to say why we think obviously it's a very good book, from the writing to the subject to the author, etc. If we decide we are going to take it on, we then have to decide how many copies we think it's going to sell. So we can cost it, and then we can propose an advance to the author, as well as what it's going to cost us to market it, to publicize it, to print it, etc., etc. But for the purposes of this, the key thing is the advance, and then as a side thing, what size is it going to be? How many pages? What's its retail price? Is it going to be hardback, paperback, etc., etc. So to do this, what we look at are these things called comp titles, and there's a lot of discussion around this because I think looking to comps can build in absolute conservatism and kind of me too publishing, and I absolutely acknowledge that, because if you're only ever looking at what's already been published, you're only looking at what's gone before, and you're not necessarily taking a kind of creative leap with something. So I'd say that really loudly and clearly, I acknowledge that. And every so often something comes along and we just as publishers have to stick our neck out and say, do you know what? We just have to do this. Believe me, we just really have to do this. But you can't say that every week. So from the business point of view, this is the best that we can get in terms of any kind of scientific analysis. It's to look at, well, what is this like? So here we've got this proposal, we've got this author, this is what they want to do. What's this title like? And therefore, what do we think roughly it's going to sell within a kind of parameter of, this is maybe the bottom level. If we do a really good job, if it really takes off, this is what it could sell. So these are the titles that we looked at as comps for this particular title, which I have on the next slide. So at the more literary end, we've got the professional medical memoirs. So Unnatural Causes, which is from a forensic pathologist, do no harm, brain surgeon, and then moving to the more kind of popular end, the prison doctor, which is clearly a female medic in a kind of prison setting, and then at the really more kind of slightly more schlocky end, that broad ball title. So we would look at these titles and think, look at their sales figures and think, right, okay, this is roughly in that area. So that's, and you could say that's really unscientific, you know, is that really all you can go on? And actually it is, you know, this is why publishing is it's a kind of high risk industry in many ways, because you can really not totally measure creativity. But just to use that to explain how some of the publishing decisions that we make are made. So to move back to the kind of framework that we were looking at, the next thing on the list would just be your author information. So here, this is talking about, you know, Kerry's career, forensic consultant and a forensic psychologist, the speaker and media commentator, got a 20-year career. She does appear on in various media, and she also supports various organizations. So that's to give some sense of you, what your platform is. You know, if you've got a really good social media following, you would very much include that there, for example. And then finally, your sample chapters. So this is where you're showcasing your writing style. And generally for nonfiction, I would say 2 sample chapters, as long as they're substantial, that's normally enough. So just to recap then, and this is the book that resulted from that pitch. So I'd be really interested to know what you think of these 2 covers, and actually which do you think is the best cover and which is which? Or, you know, do you think there's a difference between these covers, I guess?
I will let Erin say, well, kick us off first.
So I mean, I feel like it doesn't pull out the best side of me, but I would see the one on the left as much more kind of academic, particularly because like the text is like, yeah, particularly because of the font. It looks like the kind of forensic side is the highlight, whereas the one on the right is very much kind of girl boss. You know, what is the impact on women, even though it doesn't say that.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. What struck you, Horatio? Sorry, I'm turning the tables and asking you questions now.
Absolutely fine. So I'm immediately see that right at the top it says Sunday Times bestseller, which is a lot. Well, maybe it's just in the way that the text is here, but it's quite prominent to me. And I'm also seeing how big the blurb is of true stories from my life as a forensic psychologist. So it really feels a little bit more personal on that one on the right versus the kind of distant room and the kind of dark that you get there. So I'm sensing that the second one potentially could be the one that we opt for. I also like the fact that it's got the quote at the top as well. Is it the same? So when I'm looking at the quotes, a chilling glimpse into the world of miscreants, monsters, and the misunderstood. Interesting. And on the other one, enthralling and terrifying, Kerry guides us through her. So yeah, again, you on the second one, it is kind of more immediate versus the other one, which is, as Erin said, perhaps more studied.
Yeah, you're both absolutely spot on. Yeah, so you can just do my job, both of you. So you're right, actually. So the one on the left is the hardback cover. And we pitched it, and I've just used this because I think it's an interesting example of, nothing is given when we start off with a book. We brief a cover, we decide how we think it should be presented to the world, and we're guessing at the best way of doing that. And we took, with the hardback cover, so the stress on the interview room, far less personal. You're absolutely right. We took a more professionally based approach to that, in line with perhaps those previous covers, unnatural causes do no harm, etc. When we came to publish the paperback, of course, by that point you have the advantage of getting feedback, of seeing where the most sales are, in which outlets, etc. And we saw that people were really responding to this sense of a female author, so a woman in a threatening environment, but actually you nailed it, Erin, when you said, she's a boss. Her whole sort of stance is, she's in control here, but there is a sense of sort of threatening things behind her. We deliberately pulled out the subtitle much more strongly. So, true stories, my life. So really emphasizing the personal there. And obviously, because by that point it was a Sunday Times bestseller, we splashed that in the most prominent position imaginable, and then use a new quote for that as well. So that is an actual example of what came from that Word document right at the start. And in fact, we're just about to publish Kerry's second book as well. So it was the start of a really good relationship. So just very quickly, I just recapped on the kind of 6 points, I think, just on the final slide. Yeah, so that was, hardback £16.99, paperback obviously cheaper. And so you're really, what you're looking for there are your kind of mission statement, who is the book for, where's it going to sell, your synopsis, comps, author treatment, and then your sample writing. So a very quick canter through what the sort of framework that your pitch might take. And I hope that was of some use.
So, Denise, this has been absolutely incredible, and I think that this is going to be a really valuable resource to many people. And just before Erin jumps in with any questions that she might have, I just wanted to pose a really quick question about the process behind the process. And what I mean by that is, what you have essentially showed us here is, I don't want to say the perfect scenario, but this assumes that if you get everything right the first time round, you do this bit, and this bit, and basically it will come through. Obviously, there might be situations where someone does the initial pitch and for some reason it doesn't work, or and it could be that there is something that they need to tweak, or it could be just the case maybe that publisher at that time didn't think it was right for them. So my question would be, how do you take on the feedback that to kind of go into the next pitch, if you will, because it's quite difficult to know if it was you and the way that you pitched it, or if it was just that they didn't really fully understand?
Absolutely. And I think ideally a publisher, if they're saying no to you, will tell you why. So it may be any of the reasons that you've just mentioned. It may be that actually strategically it's not the right book for them at that particular point. It might be that they've already got 5 not dissimilar books. If you've got a key author in that space, you don't want to be competing with yourself by taking on another. you might get some specific feedback about the content of the book in itself. You know, you might be saying, for example, I see this selling in supermarkets, but your writing is more academic in tone. Ideally, a publisher would say that. They're not always going to, because you get a lot of proposals and you don't always have the time to sort of do that analysis. So I guess it's just really persevering. And if you're getting consistent messages, it's obviously disappointing, but it's probably also useful, because if it is consistent, then that's the thing that you should be working on. Sometimes things are just ahead of their time. You know, you could ask me for my ones that got away, in the sense of books that I said no to, and then actually afterwards thought, oh my God, you know, that was really a mistake. And possibly lots of my peers have done the same thing, but you know, we all have kind of ones we regret, and then a year down the line you suddenly see it, you know, it's kind of time is right. So there's that as well. But I think the way you can give yourself the best possible chance, because there are lots of factors that are outside of your control, in terms of, you know, you as the author can't dictate that publisher's strategy and a decision, well, we want to move more into this area, away from that area, whatever, you know, sadly that's outside of your control. But what you can control is how you're putting it all together, and just really trying to present it in the best way possible, so that you're giving it the best possible chance.
Thanks so much, Denise. And so, Erin, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. That was really useful. And I've been typing frantically, which is probably why my camera is shaking a bit. I wanted to ask, following on from that, if publishers ever kind of rework what you've proposed. Would they say, like, we appreciate this is your vision, however, we like your idea, we like you as a writer, but we think, you know, you could do this instead? Is that likely? Does it happen often?
It does happen, actually. It does happen. I mean, to be honest, there needs to be enough there in the first place to invest in that work and working on it. But I can think of quite a few occasions where we've really liked, you know, you might, for example, absolutely love somebody's writing, but you think that the book that they've proposed is just not quite right. Or vice versa, somebody comes up with a brilliant idea or concept, but they haven't quite executed it as in the way that you think they might have done. And if there's enough there, you would go back and say, look, we don't think this is quite right, but actually we think, you know, this as plan B could work. What do you think? Cool. And some people just have an absolute, you know, idea in their head that that's the only thing they're going to do, and they're going to go and try and sell it in its existing form, which is absolutely fair enough. Other people are prepared to work with you on it.
Okay.
So it certainly happens. Yeah.
And would you also recommend almost slightly altering your proposal based on the publishers? So I'm still trying to work out what
yeah, I think that's a really good question. And actually I would. I mean, again, I know it's kind of, you know, some writers feel, well, this, you know, the integrity of my idea, and et cetera. But actually, there's a kind of shorthand and just a kind of ease of communication. And if you are perhaps referencing other titles of a publishers that you like, particularly of that editor, you know, if you're targeting a particular editor and you've done a bit of digging and think, oh, they published that, and I really like that and how they published it. So I think there's a little bit of working that into your approach. And yeah, so if you see a way that you could just sort of pivot your proposal so that it looks like it fits somebody's program best, then that will absolutely give you a better chance as well.
Right. Another question I had, sorry, I've got quite a few.
No, just, yeah, far
was
away.
with the example of Kerry Danes, like, I guess it's kind of like, I know why I want to write what I want to write, but I don't know why other people do. And is it, do a lot of people come forward just saying, I have this thing that has to be told? Do some people just say, I just want to write a book? Do some people say other people have told them? Like, what's a common and good reason to write a book?
Yeah, there are many, many, many reasons, ranging from, I've got these stories in me and I've just, I want to write, to actually, I want to make as much money as I possibly can. And I think I've got something really saleable, and, I'm going to try and get the highest possible price for it. And then very often in between, I think a lot of people are moved by, they have experiences and they have encountered things in their professional lives, very often the kind of people that I'm working with, and they know that they have insight. And it's a combination of thinking that and knowing that they have really interesting stories to tell, but actually through those stories they can get out to a wider audience knowledge about that might be why something is not working in terms of political systems or social systems, etc. There's very often a message that people want to convey as well, and I think you can do that really effectively through narrative, actually. It's more subtle, but in telling a story you're kind of entertaining people, but you're also subtly getting over a really important point probably as well.
Great, thank you. And then I also wanted to ask, in the examples where people are using real stories or case studies and they want to interview people, is that something that the publishers support with in terms of legal permission to share those details? Or
yeah, there's a whole legal question around that, and certainly in a book like Curry's and in other quite similar titles, you have to be very careful about privacy, about all of those issues, and make sure that people are anonymized. And it has to go through a legal read. So all of our nonfiction has to go to a lawyer before publication, who will read it for issues of obviously libel or privacy, etc. And they will do a full report. I mean, as the publisher, you have to anticipate as much of that to start with. And there are some books that you would just absolutely love to publish, but you know that they're never going to get through the lawyers, actually, and you just have to sort of stand back from those. So you try to anticipate, and obviously you make people not identifiable while still getting over the truth of that story. And then when you get your lawyer's report, they have taken it to another level of going through everything absolutely with a fine-tooth comb, and you then have to work with the author to kind of negotiate what's going to be changed. But ultimately, we can't publish a book that has not had that legal sign-off.
Okay. And I guess is referencing like publicly accessible information okay? So say I wanted to criticize the BBC or something because a report has said something, is that okay, or do I
so things that are something that is generally in the public domain, which can be proven, has been quoted by multiple sources, that is okay. Yeah, and please don't come back to me in 3 years from now and say you said that was going to be okay. But as a generalization, and also, people do make, obviously, particularly in sort of personal stories, make allegations about people, which, as long as they can be proven. And therein lies the sort of big area, but it isn't intended to kind of muzzle people, but you can't just make allegations that are without any substance, obviously. Yeah.
Okay, great. I think those are all my questions, or at least the kind of more general ones. I appreciate whoever on YouTube might not want to hear me waffle on about my own kind of ideas, but that was really, really helpful. Thank you so much.
So nothing
Great.
further from me either, but only a really big thank you to you, Denise, for all of the insights. Like I said, the way in which this session has been packaged has been so powerful to be able to see from the beginning of the process all the way through to the end, as well as the continued insight in terms of the process behind the process. All really, really valuable. And so before closing the call, is there anything final that you would highlight? Anything that you've seen that you would say actually just reviewing the presentation, anything that kind of comes to mind for you, Denise?
I think it is, I think your questions have been absolutely spot on, actually, and it makes me think about, I suppose, the elements that we really need to make as clear as possible. And I think trying, for example, where we are saying no to something, giving some indication, sadly hours in the day are limited, but rather than just saying, oh, just not answering, but actually if there is something that we think could quite easily be fixed, then I think it's very helpful to say that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you to Denise, thank you to Erin, and thank you to everyone who's watching.
Thank you very much for hosting the PowerPoint. Sorry about that.
No problem at all. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Lovely. And great to meet you, Erin.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.